If someone had told Helen Matthews that asking for help could lead to being erased, she might have reconsidered moving in. But pain has a way of softening pride. And after her hip surgery at 68, Helen had little choice. Her small bungalow wasn't suitable for recovery, and her only daughter Amanda insisted she move in just until you're back on your feet. First, Helen was grateful. Amanda's suburban house had wide hallways and a downstairs guest room with a view of the maple tree in the backyard. Cody, her 16-year-old grandson, had even helped carry in her suitcase. Helen told herself it was just a few weeks, a month at most, but months passed. The first signs were easy to ignore. Amanda started managing Helen's medication schedule, which made sense. She also took over Helen's banking, just to simplify things, and changed her prescriptions to paperless, to keep it organized. It felt practical at the time. Efficient. Amanda was good at managing things. Always had been. Then came the conversations Helen wasn't included in. The whispered calls. The bridge club meetup she wasn't told about. The neighbors who used to ask about her no longer visited. Amanda claimed Helen had asked for rest, but Helen hadn't. She hadn't asked for anything but time to heal. By the third month, Amanda was buying groceries without asking Helen what she needed. When Helen wanted to cook, Amanda said, "You've done enough of that in your life, Mom." When she wanted to walk alone, Amanda fretted about her fall risk. And when she mentioned going to the bank, Amanda laughed gently. "Why go? Everything's handled." Helen would lie awake some nights staring at the ceiling, wondering when she stopped being a mother and started being a project. She loved Amanda. That wasn't in question. She had worked double shifts at the birthing center to make sure Amanda had piano lessons, new winter coats, and university applications paid in full. She'd buried her husband early and carried their world on her back. Now, the same daughter she once held through broken curfews and first heartbreaks was treating her like a stubborn appliance. Useful once, now inconvenient. It wasn't outright cruelty. That would have been easier to name. It was in the way Amanda answered for her at the doctor's office. "She forgets sometimes," Amanda said once when Helen corrected a nurse about her dosage. Helen didn't forget. She was foggy from new medication, but she remembered that appointment with perfect clarity. She remembered the humiliation of being talked over, as though her own health had been delegated. It was in the way Amanda set reminders on Helen's phone without asking, told her when to shower, and scolded her for sneaking cookies. Helen wasn't diabetic. She wasn't senile. But slowly Amanda crafted a version of her that was too tired, too fragile, too confused to function alone. One afternoon, Helen noticed that her mail had stopped coming. Not missing, rerouted. Amanda had signed up for digital delivery for your convenience. And Helen hadn't received a bank statement in over a month. Her pharmacy called to verify a refill, but Helen didn't recognize the medication. Amanda said, "Don't worry, I cleared it with the doctor." As if Helen's body was someone else's paperwork. Cody started making offhand comments too. "Why don't you just give Mom your card if she's doing everything else?" he joked one evening. Amanda didn't correct him. Helen said nothing. But that night she searched the house for her bank card. It was gone. She wanted to believe it had just been misplaced. That Amanda had simply put it in a drawer for safekeeping. But Helen knew the truth in her bones. The same way she'd known when a newborn was about to cry before they even took their first gasp of air. She knew she was being kept. Not cared for, kept. That knowledge sank deep. It sat in her chest like a stone. Still, Helen hesitated to confront Amanda. What would she say? That she felt like a ghost in the home she was welcomed into? That her daughter's efficiency had become a cage? That she no longer had control over her own prescriptions, purchases, or peace? Instead, she journaled. Small entries, shaky handwriting. "Asked about my card again today," she deflected. "Cody thinks I'm rich. I miss buying my own tea." The pages filled up with quiet truths, each one a breadcrumb back to the woman she used to be. Helen found herself waking earlier and earlier, just to claim a moment of solitude. She would sit by the kitchen window before anyone stirred, sipping lukewarm tea and staring at the maple tree. Its leaves were starting to turn. Fall had always been her favorite season. But now, even the change in weather felt like something happening without her. And that's when the decision took root. She wouldn't go on like this. She hadn't survived childbirth without anesthesia, night shifts, and widowhood to be managed into invisibility. She was still Helen. She still mattered. She didn't know what her next move would be. Not yet. But for the first time in months she was thinking about moving at all. The morning it happened started like most others. Helen was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, slowly stirring a bowl of oatmeal that had already gone lukewarm. Amanda rushed around in her usual pre-work routine, pouring coffee, checking emails on her phone, muttering about meetings. Cody, bleary-eyed in pajama pants, was slouched at the counter scrolling through his phone with the urgency only a teenager could muster. Helen tried to make small talk. "How'd your test go yesterday, sweetheart?" Cody barely looked up. "Fine." Amanda gave a curt nod as she brushed past the table. "He got a B+. We're proud, aren't we, Mom?" Helen smiled weakly. "Of course." Then it happened. "Hey, Grandma," Cody said suddenly, his tone unusually chipper. "Can I borrow your card for something?" Helen blinked. "My card?" "Yeah. There's this limited edition skin pack for my game. It's only available today. I'll pay you back." Helen set her spoon down gently. "Cody, I'm sorry, but that's not something I can do." Amanda stopped mid-step. "What do you mean you can't do it?" "I don't feel comfortable giving out my card for video games," Helen said quietly. Cody scowled. "You let Mom use it all the time." Amanda took a sharp breath, crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, and set her coffee cup down with a little too much force. "Are you really going to start this again?" Helen tried to hold her ground. "Amanda, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I'd like to have my card back. I can manage my own finances." Amanda's face twisted, disbelief turning into fury. "Are you serious right now?" Helen started, but the words caught in her throat. Without warning, Amanda picked up her coffee and flung it toward Helen. The scalding liquid splashed across her lap and down her legs. She gasped in shock, the heat biting through the thin cotton of her robe. She pushed her chair back, trembling. Cody froze. "You're unbelievable," Amanda snarled. "After everything I do for you, this is how you repay me? Acting like I'm some kind of thief." Helen stood slowly, her knees shaking. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," Amanda snapped. "You think you can waltz in here, take up space, eat our food, live under my roof, and then throw your authority around like it's 1975. I didn't ask to be here forever." "No," Amanda interrupted, her voice icy now. "But you're not leaving either, are you? You're just here, like a piece of furniture that complains. Maybe it's time you did leave." The words landed harder than the coffee ever could. In that moment, with her robe soaked and her skin stinging, Helen saw it clearly. She was no longer a mother, no longer a guest, no longer even family. She was a problem. A burden. A debit card with a weak heart and tired eyes. She turned to Cody, who stood silent, watching. His eyes didn't reflect fear or concern, only irritation, as though breakfast had been inconvenienced. Helen walked slowly, methodically to her room. Amanda didn't follow. She sat back down, muttering about ungrateful people. Helen could hear her tapping angrily on her phone. In her room, Helen peeled off the wet robe and sat on the bed in silence. The sting of the coffee had lessened, but the bruise to her spirit was just beginning to take shape. She looked around at the framed photo of Amanda as a girl, the baby blanket Cody had once slept with, now folded in a drawer. This wasn't home. Not anymore. Home was where you were loved without needing to prove your usefulness. She stared at her nightstand and pulled open the drawer. Her journal was there. Last night's entry stared back at her. "I feel invisible." Not anymore. With shaky hands, she picked up her phone and dialed. "Hello. Walter, it's Helen." "Helen? It's early. Are you okay?" There was a pause. "No," she said. "But I think I'm ready to be." Walter's voice softened. "Tell me everything." That call would mark the beginning of something she hadn't felt in years. Not revenge. Not anger. Agency. She had been quiet for too long, sacrificing her dignity for the illusion of family. But after this morning she knew better. You can't keep giving pieces of yourself to people who only want what's in your wallet. By the end of that call, they had a plan. She didn't know yet what the fallout would be. But she knew one thing for certain. Amanda had drawn the line in scalding coffee, and Helen was finally stepping over it. Helen sat on the edge of the guest bed, the sting from Amanda's coffee still tingling on her legs. But it wasn't the scald that hurt most. It was the realization that she had been reduced to an inconvenience, a debit card with a limp. No apology had followed. No bandage. Just silence and the sound of Cody returning to his video games, unbothered. She stared at the broken coffee mug in the bin. A delicate ceramic daisy once painted by her late husband, now shattered like her illusions of family care. After a long shower and change into fresh clothes, Helen sat at her small writing desk and pulled open the drawer she hadn't touched in months. Inside was a thin stack of documents, copies of her will, insurance policies, and one important folder labeled deed. 219 Brookshire Lane. Her house. Still in her name. Amanda had convinced her to move in temporarily, claiming it would be easier for Helen's recovery. But Helen had never officially transferred anything. It had always remained hers. With trembling fingers, she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Walter Price speaking, came the calm, gravelly voice. "Walter," she said. "It's Helen Matthews. I need your help." A long pause. Then, "I'll be there in an hour." True to his word, Walter arrived before the clock struck 10. He brought with him a yellow notepad, a weathered briefcase, and a calm that steadied her. They sat at the kitchen table, Helen wincing slightly as she shifted to find a comfortable seat, and began to talk. "I'm sorry I let it get this far," Helen said. "But I didn't see it until today." "Not really." Walter nodded, scribbling a note. "You trusted her. That's not a crime. But taking advantage of that trust? That might be." They started with the basics: proof of ownership, medical bills Amanda had claimed to pay, bank statements Helen hadn't seen in months. Walter raised an eyebrow when Helen retrieved a small notebook where she had started documenting every odd financial interaction. "She set up automatic withdrawals," Helen said. "Said it was easier that way. I didn't realize what else she was siphoning off." Walter reviewed the ledger. Gaming consoles, clothing hauls, online subscriptions. "This isn't caregiving, it's exploitation." As they combed through statements and legal records, the picture became clearer. Amanda had changed Helen's banking passwords under the guise of convenience. She rerouted paper mail to her own email. She'd even called Helen's insurance provider and requested correspondence go to her instead. The noose had been tightening quietly for months. "You still have power of attorney?" Walter asked. Helen shook her head. "Never signed it over. She just acted like she had it." He smiled faintly. "That's something then." That afternoon, they drove to a local print shop where Walter helped Helen make notarized copies of every important document. Title deed, identity, medical records, evidence. It felt like building a wall after someone had already tried to burn the house down. But at least it was something. Later, back in the car, Walter handed her a small folder. "This is your next step," he said. "A petition for financial guardianship revocation. It'll protect your estate and start a legal paper trail. If she tries anything else, we'll be ready." Helen exhaled deeply. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath. "I feel like a fool," she said quietly. Walter looked at her, gentle but direct. "You're not a fool, Helen. You're a mother. And sometimes mothers believe in their children longer than they deserve." That night, Helen didn't cry. She wrote. She listed every lie Amanda had told. Every time Cody had demanded something like he was owed it. Every time she felt invisible in the house she once considered sanctuary. Then, with resolve, she typed up a short, firm notice. To Amanda. "I will no longer tolerate financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, or threats. This house remains legally mine. You have 30 days to vacate or respond through legal counsel. Helen Matthews." She printed it on crisp stationery. Not out of cruelty but clarity. For the first time in months, Helen slept with her door closed and locked. Not out of fear, but because she was reclaiming space. Her space. Tomorrow she and Walter would file the documents. The next day they'd talk to a real estate advisor. And the day after that, perhaps, Helen would walk to the little senior community near the library she used to love. Because autonomy wasn't something she'd ask for anymore. It was something she'd take back. Helen had always believed in the power of words. Calm, measured, and kind. But now she was learning to believe in the power of signatures, notarized documents, and certified letters. Words had failed her with Amanda. Now the law would speak for her. With Walter's help, Helen spent the following week restructuring her life. The first step, setting up a revocable living trust. She named herself as trustee and designated Walter as a successor trustee, ensuring her estate would remain protected and decisions about her assets would be governed on her terms. The house, her modest but beloved brick bungalow on Hawthorne Street, was transferred into the trust. Walter filed the title documents promptly, ensuring they were recorded and legally binding. As Helen signed the last page, her hand trembled, not from doubt but from the sheer weight of reclaiming what was always hers. "You're not just taking control," Walter said, gently guiding her through the last signature. "You're creating a fortress." Next came the financial cleanup. Walter introduced her to a certified fraud prevention specialist named Denise. Helen, weary but resolute, met Denise at a local credit union where they spent an afternoon freezing her old accounts and setting up entirely new ones with multi-layer authentication. Amanda would no longer have access. Any lingering auto payments or connected debit transactions were flagged, and every card Amanda might have used was voided. As Denise scrolled through flagged transactions, Helen saw the trail of betrayal in stark numbers. $429 to a boutique cosmetics brand, $213 for a gaming console controller, multiple streaming service subscriptions, some of which Helen had never heard of, and a $1,200 charge to a luxury resort spa. "I haven't had a facial in 20 years, Helen said dryly. Denise smiled. "You won't pay a penny of this. We'll dispute everything." By the time Helen returned home that evening, a quiet strength had taken root. Her financial past had been untangled. Her legal rights were secure, and her home was now insulated within a trust no one could casually threaten. She took off her shoes, stood in the center of her living room, and let herself feel the shift. For the first time in years she wasn't afraid. But Amanda was. The calls began that night. First a cold, clipped voicemail. "What do you think you're doing?" Then a barrage of missed calls and text messages, each more aggressive than the last. "Amanda, you're ruining everything." "Amanda, Cody's devastated. You're abandoning your family." "Amanda, I'll call the police if you lock us out." Helen didn't answer. She didn't reply. She simply forwarded the messages to Walter, who archived each one. "Amanda's panic is not your emergency," he reminded Helen over the phone. "Let the paperwork speak." And it did. A certified letter arrived at Amanda's residence, Helen's house, outlining the trust's terms, giving her 30 days to vacate. Another letter was sent by Walter's office notifying Amanda that any further financial activity made on Helen's behalf would be considered fraudulent and pursued accordingly. Helen didn't need to yell. She didn't need to beg for respect. She now had documents that demanded it for her. 2 weeks passed, and Helen stayed quiet. Each morning, she walked through her small garden, pruning the lavender bushes and humming softly to herself. She hadn't felt this peaceful in years. Each evening she sat on the front porch, watching the streetlights blink on one by one, sipping chamomile tea from the mug Amanda had once rolled her eyes at. She didn't care anymore. Amanda left one last voicemail, bitter and defiant. "You'll die alone, Helen. Don't forget that." But Helen wasn't alone. Walter checked in regularly. Denise texted to confirm charges being reversed. Her neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, a retired schoolteacher, stopped by with a pie and stories from the local knitting club. And then there was the quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't lonely, but clean, sacred. Helen lit a candle on her windowsill that night. A tiny flame in the dark, a symbol of everything she had reclaimed. She had been called a burden, a senile old woman, a wallet. Now, she was a woman with a name on a deed, with a team at her side, with dignity returning to her one signed page at a time. She had drawn a line, and this time no one was crossing it. Helen arrived at Willow Ridge on a crisp Monday morning, 2 suitcases in hand and her heart strangely calm. It wasn't the grand home she had once shared with Amanda and Cody, but it was hers. Every choice, every inch, every quiet hour would now belong to her again. Willow Ridge was nestled on the edge of town, surrounded by maple trees and bordered by walking paths that led to small koi ponds and garden beds planted by residents. The brick cottages were modest, tidy, and humming with life. Neighbors waved to one another as Helen was shown to her suite, a cheerful one-bedroom with large bay windows and sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. "I think you'll be happy here, Ms. Matthews," said the community director, handing her a welcome packet. "There's morning yoga, art classes, and bingo nights if you're into that sort of thing." Helen smiled. "I might be." That night, she unpacked slowly, one drawer for warm cardigans, another for old family photos she had almost left behind. She placed a picture of her late husband George on the bookshelf beside a potted succulent. "We made it, darling," she whispered. Finally. The days that followed were filled with small joys. Morning walks by the koi pond, where the fish would swim lazily beneath the surface as if offering silent approval. Coffee chats in the shared lounge where she met June, a retired nurse with a wicked sense of humor, and Margot, a former jazz singer who still wore scarves like stage curtains. For the first time in years, Helen felt seen not as a burden or a checkbook, or an aging inconvenience, but as a person with stories, wisdom, and value. The constant buzzing of her phone had gone silent. Amanda's texts had stopped after the 30-day notice period expired. No more guilt trips. No more scalding words wrapped in faux concern. Helen had blocked the number weeks ago, not out of cruelty, but because some voices simply didn't deserve access anymore. Instead, she filled her days with peace. At art class, she rediscovered watercolor painting, something she hadn't touched since nursing school. Her hands, though slower now, found rhythm in the strokes. She painted the koi pond one afternoon, capturing the way light bounced off the water like stained glass. She called Walter once a week, just to say hello and offer updates. Denise occasionally checked in too. Her last message read, "3 final charges reversed. Your account is clean. Go thrive, Helen. You earned it." And thrive she did. One Thursday evening, Helen hosted her first little gathering in her new space. June brought lemon bars, Margot brought old vinyls, and Helen brewed a pot of lavender tea. They laughed like teenagers, danced like no one was watching, and swapped stories about first loves and worst neighbors. "I didn't know how much I needed this," Helen admitted as the evening wore down. "You didn't need us," Margot said, leaning back with a grin. "You just needed you back." Helen smiled. It was true. The Helen who had once walked on eggshells was gone. The woman who had been told she was too much, too emotional, or too old to matter, had packed those lies away like moth-eaten sweaters and left them behind. Now her mornings were hers. Her choices hers. Her voice clear again. Sometimes, she thought of Cody, his little boy grin, the way he used to beg for bedtime stories when he was small. She missed him terribly. She wrote letters she never sent, tucked into a drawer for a future that might one day allow healing. But she no longer mourned Amanda's approval. That door was closed. On the first Saturday of the new month, Helen sat on a bench near the koi pond with her sketch pad. A young woman from the community staff passed by and paused to glance at her drawing. "Wow, that's beautiful. You used to be an artist?" Helen chuckled. "No, dear. I used to be a midwife, but I think this might be my second act." The staff member smiled. "Well, it's a good one." And it was. Because healing wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in soft moments. In tea that stayed warm. In silence that wasn't threatening. In the way a paintbrush glided across paper without the weight of anyone else's expectations. Helen looked around at the quiet paths, the pond, the open sky. She was no longer surviving. She was living. And she would never again give that away. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the envelope arrived. Helen had just returned from the library at Willow Ridge, where she'd checked out a memoir and a cookbook she'd promised to try with her friend June. Her umbrella still dripped onto the entry mat when she saw the letter slipped beneath her door. No return address, no markings, just her name written in Amanda's sharp, unmistakable handwriting. She paused. A part of her had hoped Amanda would fade into silence, that the storm had passed with the property settlement and the frozen bank accounts. But deep down, Helen knew Amanda too well. Her daughter was never one to lose quietly. She took the envelope to the kitchen, laid it flat, and slid it open with the steady hand of someone who was no longer afraid. Inside was a letter. Its tone syrupy, its words carefully measured. Dear Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know things got out of hand, and I wasn't always kind. I let my stress spill onto you and I'm truly sorry. I miss our talks and Cody misses you too. He's been asking about you. He doesn't understand why you disappeared. I hope we can talk, maybe even start over. I've enclosed something that might help. Tucked inside was a check. Made out to Helen Matthews. Signed in a messy scribble that mimicked George's long-dead signature. The date was off. The paper knew. But it was clear what Amanda intended. A forged check from Helen's late husband, meant to look like some forgotten inheritance gift. No explanation. No legality. Just manipulation dressed up in sentiment. Helen didn't blink. She didn't cry. She reached for her phone and took a photo of the check, front and back. Then she sealed the original into a manila envelope and called Walter. Amanda's trying something again, she said calmly. Forgery this time. It's sloppy. Walter sighed on the other end. That woman never learns. I'll contact the DA's office and our investigator. Thank you, Helen said. Let's do it right. That evening she sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and reviewing her journal. She had begun documenting everything months ago, calls, letters, encounters. This latest incident would be entered like all the others. Not with rage but with clarity. Helen no longer reacted from emotion. She responded with facts and strategy. Within 2 weeks, Helen received a follow-up call from the County Financial Crimes Unit. They confirmed the check was being treated as an attempted act of forgery and financial elder abuse. A detective requested an interview, which Helen conducted from the comfort of her living room with June sitting beside her for quiet support. I never expected this to go that far, Helen admitted to the officer. But I won't protect her from consequences. Not anymore. They nodded respectfully. You're not the only senior we've spoken to recently. What you've done reporting this, it helps more people than you know. That evening, Helen received a message from Amanda. A voice note this time. You're really doing this? Amanda's voice cracked under the strain. After everything? I'm your daughter. You'd turn me in over a piece of paper. Helen listened once, then deleted it. She didn't owe Amanda a reply. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about principle. About protecting herself, and maybe protecting someone else's mother or grandmother from the same fate. By the end of the month, formal charges were under review. Walter handled the details. Helen handled her garden. At Willow Ridge, nothing changed. She still attended art class. Still played cards with June on Wednesday nights. Still walked past the koi pond in the early morning and paused to whisper hello to George, wherever he might be. But inside something had solidified. She had not just survived what Amanda had done. She had come through it stronger, wiser, and clearer than ever. Her voice, once drowned in obligation and guilt, now carried the weight of truth. Her house was hers again. Her finances were clean. Her mind was steady. And her life? Fully her own. One Sunday morning, she stood by the community center bulletin board and saw a flyer for a peer support group. Financial abuse recovery, sharing stories, reclaiming dignity. Helen smiled. She took one of the little tear-off tabs at the bottom. Maybe it was time. Time to help others the way Walter had helped her. Time to tell her story. Not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that even after betrayal, a new life was possible. A life of peace. A life of strength. A life that said, I am not invisible. I am not expendable. I am not a victim anymore. That night, she opened her journal to a blank page. She titled it, The Day I Chose Myself Over Guilt. And with a pen that no longer shook in her hand, Helen wrote, Amanda may have taken my trust, but she will never take my peace. How do you reclaim your voice after years of being silenced by those you love the most? Helen Matthews' journey is a powerful reminder that age does not diminish our worth, and love should never come at the cost of dignity. After enduring emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and even physical abuse under the guise of care, Helen chose courage over compliance. With quiet strength and the help of a trusted ally, she reasserted control over her life, not through revenge, but through wisdom, legal boundaries, and self-respect. Her story teaches us that it's never too late to draw a line, never too late to demand respect, and never too late to begin again. It also shines a light on a growing issue many older adults face: hidden abuse within the family, where control is disguised as concern. Helen's choice to say enough sparked not only her healing, but also the possibility for others to speak up. So we ask you, what would you do if someone you trusted treated your love like a weakness? Have you ever felt erased, managed, or sidelined in your own family? You are not alone, and you are not powerless. Let Helen's story be your reminder. Your life has value, your boundaries matter, and your voice still carries weight. Speak it, live it, share it,